is being done. We all know about BiG and Biotech's exemplary attempt to actually, ignite the entire biotech setup in India. And BiG has actually, as the name suggests, has actually done that part. It has now created, if I may use the word, plethora of innovations which are being attempted at various levels. It has actually led us to look at many such attempts which are phenomenally innovative and excitingly bold, which India hadn't seen for many years before. And BiG actually is the reason, the biggest reason that it has happened. The reason I'm expanding on this for all participants today, the reason is that this building of this capability and a plethora of innovations has actually come really handy in the situation of COVID-19. I'm just trying to link that very importantly aspect. COVID-19, we all know it's testing time for all of us. It has affected a lot of people, and we have lost, hundreds of thousands of people, and that's very, very sad. India, which possibly saw it coming around February to March, we saw an important aspect at that time that in India, while COVID-19 was seen as a possible danger, there was a hope against hope that we would have less impact of COVID-19. And that was something very interesting that people were hoping. But when it became quite apparent that COVID-19 would be also a challenging reality for India, we found ourselves possibly as a nation something wanting in terms of resources, the innovations that could actually help people on the ground. And those were all kind of resources which were not available or not accessible to us for many reasons. One of the larger reasons that it happened is that many a times healthcare, we have been working with international organizations to build our healthcare resources. Either it's through import or collaboration or all. And sometimes when they are not accessible, it can give you a challenge, and that's what happened COVID-19. Many solutions were not accessible at all because of demand worldwide, so the capacity was not there. And second is the accessibility was not there because of logistics. In these times, our backyard innovations actually did a big shift in terms of what they would like to do. They actually, if they were in the proximity of COVID-19 treatment challenges, they actually moved significantly and pivoted and made those innovations which are now serving people in the society. And that was possible because there was 8 to 10 or more years of work by agencies like Biotech and initiatives like BiG to invest in capacity building, that is in innovation, and at the same time, to give people to build innovations a freedom to fail so that they don't really have the strings attached to that. So all in all, what I wanted to say as a context for this particular session, which is very, very important, how COVID-19, which is a gigantic problem in front of us, how the innovations in India actually have made an impact in the way people are being served. And I can tell you COVID-19 serving products right now are from the BiG fraternity. There are products which are in the respiratory resources. There are products which are in the diagnostic resources, are serving people which are approved through the regulatory system and so on. And that is actually a phenomenal example of how BiG has made a huge difference in terms of serving people through that. With that, I am very, very excited that we have excellent panel of different flavor of bringing together aspects of clinical angle in terms of the physician inputs. We have Professor Shravanti, we have Dr. Jitendra Sharma, who comes from the one of the biggest medtech park, AMTZ. We have Dr. Anil Johri, who has been leading the effort in terms of regulatory and certification and bring the perspective of how products actually come to market. And then we have Mr. Jayant Karve, who is actually building as a startup, as an innovator, has involved in many innovations himself and leading those innovations to the market. I will request one by one Professor Shravanti to begin with to introduce themselves and share their views in terms of how COVID-19, which is a gigantic challenge according to them, has changed the seeing the perspectives in terms of our healthcare and innovations in togetherness. So over to you, Professor Shravanti, for a quick introduction and thoughts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taslim. First of all, it is just such an intense pleasure and a significant and singular pleasure and a privilege to be part of this session. And many congratulations to SIIC and IIT Kanpur for hosting this. In fact, I got up at 4:45 this morning, 5 a.m. UK time, to listen to the very inspiring speakers at the inaugural session. Maestros in their fields and all who have contributed greatly, not just to Indian innovation and entrepreneurship, but also globally. I feel very much part of India. I'm sitting in England at this moment where it's pretty cold outside. I was born and had my early childhood in Sri Lanka. I came to high school in Bangalore. I'm from Bishop Cotton's in Bangalore. I did my medicine at Mysore Medical College, and then I did my early surgical training at CMC Vellore. And Dr. Taslim and I were just discussing what great institutions India has produced, such as CMC Vellore and other notable medical institutions. I then came to England to complete my higher surgical training and became a consultant vascular surgeon, where I still am at Leeds Teaching Hospitals, which is 2,500 bedded acute care trust in England. We are the largest acute care hospital in the whole of Europe, in excess of 2,500 beds. Not large by Indian standards, but very large by European standards. In addition to this appointment, I'm also the inaugural professor of engineering and surgery at University College London. And when I go to London every week, which I do pre-pandemic, I sit in the Department of Engineering, looking at the application of engineering technologies in healthcare. And that has been a very, very productive period of my life. I'm also the founding chair of surgery at the University of Warwick. In addition to this, I have 3 international appointments. I'm a visiting scholar at Harvard with Professor George Whitesides, who is the father of microfluidics, where we look at low-cost diagnostics using microfluidic techniques, and again, which has come into its own during the pandemic. The Yogim Singh Professor of Surgery at National University, Singapore. And the third is probably the dearest to my heart. I'm the Brahm Prakash Visiting Professor at the Indian Institute of Science. Absolutely an amazing, amazing institution. And I used to walk the grounds of the Indian Institute of Science as a schoolgirl when I was in Bishop Cotton's, and now hold a visiting chair at IISc. It's more than a dream. So those are my appointments. I have spent 30 years in the National Health Service in England. It is an amazing health service, very many parallels and collaboration in India and worldwide. And this is the only year in the 30 years I've been away that I haven't been back to India. But I hope to put that to bed as soon as better times come and I can travel. I think I'll stop there, Dr. Taslim, and hand over to our fellow panelists, and then we'll come back.
Thank you. I think absolutely, incredible, work efforts that you are leading, and we're looking forward to bring that into discussion as we build the panel. I'll move to Dr. Jitendra Sharma, if he's there, for his quick introductions and thoughts on that.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm Dr. Jitendra Sharma, the Managing Director and Founder CEO of AMTZ, which is India's first medical devices manufacturing zone. I have a background of only factories behind me. You have to excuse me for that. Prior to this, I was the founder of the Medical Technology Department at National Health System Resource Center under Ministry of Health, and the founder director of the India's first WHO collaborating center on medical devices. I'm also the founder executive director of Kalam Institute of Health Technology, which is a technology policy unit for Government of India in the field of medical devices, and founder chairman of Indian Biomedical Skill Council under Ministry of Skill Development, which takes care of national accreditations on the biomedical sector. My background is medical technology. hospital administration and health economics. I am trained in AIMS and have my experience from Satya Sai Baba's Hospital in Bangalore, Puttaparthi, All India Institute, New Delhi, World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva, Johns Hopkins, and Ministry of Health prior to my role as the founder CEO of AMTZ. Glad to be in the panel. I see Mr. Johari, my good friend, and Taslim already there, and a pleasure to be with all of you once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jitendra. I think, again, fantastic background of work that you come from, and looking forward to integrate that into the panel again. May I move to Mr. Anil Johari, who again has a phenomenal record in terms of building a fantastic institution for the certification. Mr. Johari, over to you for a quick introduction and what aspects that we can build on.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me in this panel. Well, I have a very varied background, but largely focused on quality. I did my engineering, civil engineering actually, from Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, way back in '78. Then went to IIT Kanpur. So I'm returning to my alma mater in a way for MTech in civil engineering again. But then I joined what was then called Indian Standards Institution and what is today called Bureau of Indian Standards, the standards body of India, and worked there for 26 years till 2006. In between, did a stint in another organization called Export Inspection Council, which is under Ministry of Commerce and Industry and certifies exports. About 3 years in EIC. In 2006, I left BIS and joined NABCB, which is a part of a larger organization called Quality Council of India. But NABCB is known internationally by its own name, functions independently within QCI framework, and it is responsible for accreditation of certification and inspection bodies, and is part of an international system whereby we bring international equivalence to our certification and inspection, like NABL brings international equivalence to testing. So, for example, in England, there is UCAS, which is our counterpart, and we are equivalent to UCAS. And I'm glad to say that NABCB and NABL are internationally equivalent to all the accreditation bodies around the world, be it US, be it Europe, be it Australia or Japan, whoever. We have all the international equivalences done. So I was in NABCB from 2006 to 2019 till last year, July. Last 6.5 years, I was the CEO of NABCB. My own association for medical devices started somewhere, I think, in 2010, when CDSU was thinking of bringing in a regulatory regime and comprehensive regulatory regime. And then it continued with AMED reaching out that there is no regulation in India, so what can we do? And we set up a voluntary system of certifying medical devices called ICMED scheme. Then, of course, then the medical devices rules came, and as you know, in medical devices rules, there are concept of notified bodies, which is what Europe also follows, and the notified bodies have to be accredited by NABCB. So the Association of Medical Devices continued. In between, we also started the Medical Devices QMS accreditation program, which recently got international equivalence after I left, of course, recently, about I think 6 months back. And since retirement, I am actually doing more of, a lot of education I am doing. Get invited to various fora and speak on quality standards, because I think, I do believe that there's huge ignorance about standards, quality, regulation, certification among all stakeholders. That includes industry, that includes government, and that includes everybody, almost everybody. So we end up with a lot of confusion on what is the right thing to do, and many times we don't do the right thing. So right now, I advise government also. I'm engaged with commerce, who are actually leading all the quality standards related issues these days, especially standards in trade. So I've been part of India-US negotiations. I've been invited by WTO a couple of times. So all that, whatever I've gathered in these 40 years, I try to now distribute as much as I can, and I'll share some with you today.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Mr. Johari. May I move quickly to good friend Jayan Karve, a phenomenal biomedical innovator and who has been involved in building really good innovations. We are proud of them to have been associated with CCamp as well. So Jayant, very quickly your introduction so we can jump on to a few of the burning questions that I have for all of us. So Jayant, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Taslim. I think it's really a privilege to be a part of this panel discussion as well as the conference. My name is Jayant Karve. Primarily, I'm an inventor of medical technologies, various medical technologies. I had been in the industry for 15 plus years, wherein I have driven various technologies from early conceptual stages to the market. In fact, various technologies are being deployed globally as we speak now. I also had an opportunity to be a farming activity of innovations in a multinational environment, as well as in collaboration with the hospitals, clinicians, sales and marketing teams. And prior to basically, I also have worked very closely with the academia, and I'm glad to be here to in these discussions. Over to you, Taslim.
Thank you so much. So now that brings us to starting the conversation, which is possibly, as you can imagine, in a specific manner. So I want to have a quick question, which would require a few seconds, quick answers. But let's begin with from perspective of a clinical physician, in a way, or the perspective of the certification, an inventor, or the head of one of the biggest medtech park. What do we see in terms of when we are looking to build healthcare technologies? What do we see that some recipes, some magic combinations? Have we seen it worldwide? Something that possibly could be something that has stuck with you in terms of healthcare innovation, and you would like to share that we could possibly expand on. I'll start with Professor Shravanti for now, but quickly, something that has stuck with you in terms of models which are going around in the strategies to build healthcare innovations.
Thank you, Taslim. I think it's very important that this is an extremely important question because of all the technologies, and I'm not belittling any of the others, IT, agriculture, etc., but health tech is extremely challenging by any yardstick that you measure it with. Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with people's lives. And I'll just remind us of the Hippocratic Oath we take as doctors. In the Hippocratic Oath, which I took when I was at Mysore Medical College and graduated, it is not that we will cure everybody, but first and foremost that we will do no harm. And I repeatedly remind our young students of this, that we have an extreme responsibility in our hands because that patient is literally leaving their life in our hands. And this is not to in any way exalt our profession over and above the others, because everybody plays a part, the engineers who build the anesthetic machines, etc. But, we really have to think about that. And when people beat the regulators for saying, over-regulation, etc., and we have a doyen of regulation and standards on this panel, I will hear from him. But it is really important that we take all these things into consideration. So I would say that the challenges produce opportunities, but opportunities also produce challenges. We must not forget that. And I give you the vaccine example at the moment, which has taken a huge challenge, turned it into an opportunity. We have got through into vaccines in a phenomenally record time. But now the implementation of this vaccination program to vaccinate the world is going to be once again one of the greatest challenges. And how many patients have I had that I have been talking to in the last months asking me, Professor Homer, you tell me, should I take this vaccine? And I will take it. And that there aren't any clear answers. And it's the same answer I give my patients when we do an operation as a vascular surgeon. The right answer is the one that we come to with you, the patient, me, the surgeon, with the anesthetist and your relatives all around us. That is the right answer. So the answer to your question, Taslim, is that there are unprecedented opportunities here. But the only way we can get through this, come out the other side, and actually do something which does no harm, is to work with people. And we should not be, I mean, we talk about networking and team, but it's not just words, it is reality. Because I have to work with the people on this panel and people in similar professions and reach out to them to ask them whether X, Y, or Z is doable. And in turn, they ask me. So if there was ever a time when we had to get together and just shed our inhibitions, shed any of the feelings that we know it all, this is the time to do it. And I'm constantly in discussion with engineers, scientists, industrialists. Jitendra Sharma said he's backed by factories behind him. Well, we need those factories because they're not going to produce it otherwise, the manufacturing chain. And I hope that the biggest hope is that after this panel discussion today, that it will not be the end of it, but it will be the beginning of various groups forming and going forward, and that we will have the time, as I do, anytime, day, night, 8 days a week that I work, that we will have the time to give to each other, try and bring these various challenging technologies and tools to clinical fruition. That is my hope. I am fairly confident we can do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shamante. And I think, if I may say so, I think you brought out two very important points, and I would rather possibly converge those. I think the challenges are one of the biggest opportunities for bringing out new models, and the convergence of different expertise, which is very much required, possibly come out more so when the challenges are, right in front of us and are, alarming as it is right now. I think India is seeing something of that, but would our actions during challenging times, does it become a normal afterward, or we possibly go back our home?
Yes, and that is a very important point, I think, because human memory is very short. We all say a new normal, but I have now got enough gray hairs on my head to remember a previous problem, a previous challenge, and how quickly we reverted to what we were doing before. Exactly. And whilst not everything has to change, whilst we do need to meet each other, we do need to change some of those things, we can't completely forget what has happened now. And so I think we must also change, each one of us must change our memories to remember what happened and how we got through it.
Indeed, very much so. And just I picked your word "remember," and I just quickly checked. Your many moons ago visit to CCAM was almost 9 years ago, and I am glad that we reconnected after that now. But moving to this important point, I move to good friend Jitendra. Well, you rightly said the manufacturing component is one of the biggest, because while we build innovations, what we need to do is manufacture and take them forward. Otherwise, this will become very good, exciting fantasy land unless we deliver them on the ground. And that is something, the great work that AMTC is doing. So over to you, Jitendra, if you're around, in your inputs in terms of how do you see the strategies before the COVID-19, post COVID-19? I have seen amazing work that AMTZ has done, and so would love to hear from you in terms of your views, how to share with everyone that you.
Thank you, Taslim. Firstly, the person who walks the road into the jungle does not have a road. They build the road. It's very difficult to do something for the first time because there is no precedence.
Correct.
And Mr. Johari in his work also would know this. You also would know that when you are doing something for the first time, even you are not confident that it will turn out to be good or bad or semi-good. You do it to the best of what you think is best. And you build the ship while sailing. That's what we have done. We started AMTZ with a single premise, and maybe if there are some mics that are on, I will request you to mute it so that there is no echo. Yeah, thank you. Now, what we started with was the single premise that if an entity has to make a defibrillator, right? A defibrillator, as Dr. Sherwanti would have used it enough in her life, is actually to give shock of 360 joules on the chest of a patient when the patient is dying. While giving the shock, you don't know whether you will be able to save the patient or not. And therefore, it can't be a torchlight. It has to be something that has to deliver. Now, despite delivering, sometimes you don't end up saving the patient, sometimes you end up saving the patient. And we use defibrillator because we hope that the number of times we'll be able to save the patient is greater than equal to number of times we will not be able to save the patient. Because we don't know whether we'll be able to save or not. Life is not entirely in our hands. Now, if this defibrillator has to be produced, it has to have certain facilities that allow a maker to pre-make it. Now, let us take a defibrillator. It has 387 components, more than 7 valves and diagrams, a power generating thermostat, a rubber panel which should not melt, and a cable which has with a certain amps of power tolerance. And when someone like Mr. Johari says this defibrillator works and is of a safe, good quality standard, and a doctor like Dr. Sherwanti is able to use it on a patient, it is understood that each one of those 387 components have met their respective quality standards and have been tested for inter-component efficiency and safety. It should not happen that one component is failing or working in a non-synchronized manner with the rest of the component. And if you are able to do this, you are a successful innovator. Example is Mr. Jain. And then he goes to a market to sell it, and the procurer says, what certification have you followed? He goes to a doyen like Mr. Johari, understands, applies, and a regulator like CDSCO approves it. A procurement gateway allows him to sell, and if he is lucky to get all his payments on time in the right manner, he is able to rotate some part of what he earns in making of more defibrillators. Right? But just imagine what an innovator has gone through while making an RT-PCR kit or a defibrillator. It's humongous amount of risk at every stage. So we started with the premise that if these technological and financial risks have to be offloaded from the innovator, what is it that we need to do? So we created a campus. We are about 8 kilometers big, 300 acres campus, hundreds of factories, partners, a mini city by itself with ready factories. But most importantly, all the industrial laboratories that are needed to make medical devices, whether it is world's largest 3D printing center or world's largest electromagnetic interference center, 40 gigahertz dual mast antenna. You can actually test an MRI in few hours. You can drive an MRI inside and test it. Whether it is biomaterial accelerated aging center for implants or a gamma sterilization plant for packaging or multiple laser centers, all these notified laboratories were set up to support medical device innovators and manufacturers to produce what they want to produce, following the due standards, offloading the technological and financial risk from them. The second thing we did was we created a pipeline of critical components. If somebody makes a ventilator, they would need multiple kinds of sensors, and nobody makes a sensor. If somebody makes a syringe pump, they will need a microcontroller, but nobody makes a microcontroller. Somebody wants to make a MRI, but nobody makes the superconducting magnet, which is 80% of the cost of an MRI. We created centers that can supply those critical components to the makers in the zone and elsewhere. When we put these two things together, which is validation laboratories that are internationally benchmarked and critical component supply necessary to produce, and gave them ready space and infrastructure to make what they want to make, they started making. In a summary, AMTZ has been a triangle of scientific infrastructure for testing, critical component supply centers for manufacturing, and ready factories and working space for actually engineering. In the center, lies the Kalam Institute of Health Technology, which is a technology policy institute under Government of India, to support on things like customs duties. Because when you make in India, you pay 7.5% customs duties to import your spares and components. But if I were to import the same machine, I would pay only 2.5% customs duty, which means making will not be economically viable. So someone has to engineer the customs duties, calibrate the standards setting and standard requirements, look at the procurement policy. All these are non-infrastructure policy instruments, and Kalam Institute of Health Technology sits inside the triangle as a circle, coordinating this policy environment on medical devices. And therefore, a circle and a triangle is what AMTZ is. Over to you.
On the note of a circle and a triangle, what possibly you very categorically indicated is AMTZ is actually serving a huge need in terms of medtech ecosystem, to be honest. I think, and that is a phenomenal thing, the ability to pull together so much different sectoral capabilities and then making sure that they are provided to the industry at different levels, and then taking them further to players who actually play a key role in terms of certification or quality control, as well as the regulatory, is very important. And that brings me to the point to Mr. Jory. Mr. Anil Jory, quick comments from you in terms of where do we see from this, like, as I think, if I may just recap, very clearly, I think Shravanji had very clearly, very nicely said that the challenging times allow us to relook at the way we build innovations and what are the models possibly. We heard from Jitendra in terms of the capabilities, the focus effort as a national effort to allow them to be manufactured. How do we look at the quality control and regulatory in such challenging times for healthcare innovations? Over to you, Mr. Jory. You may have.
As far as regulation and quality is concerned, unfortunately, this is a sector in which we are perhaps quite a bit way behind. I have this theory that when we liberalized in 1991, our decision makers and policy makers got into a mindset which said, no more regulation, because regulation means Inspector Raj. So don't talk regulation. So for several years, I think that mindset continued, that don't talk regulation. And I think COVID crisis should be a reminder to our policymakers how important regulations are when it is a matter of health and safety. We are not talking regulation in general, we are talking for health and safety, and regulation is absolutely necessary. And it's necessary along the chain. So today we have an unfortunate situation where our healthcare hospitals are not regulated, our medical labs are not regulated, our medical devices are not regulated. The whole chain is unregulated. So you are free to place anything in the market and anything goes, as long as the customer takes it. Just yesterday, I had a call from a distributor. Imagine a distributor ringing me up from Bombay, that he bought 5,000 pulse oximeters from XYZ, and he produced a US FDA certificate which turned out to be fake, and he had lots of complaints. And what does he do now? We're stuck with 5,000 pulse oximeters supplied to hospitals, and everybody's complaining. So I hope it reminds our policymakers that regulation is a necessity. A good regulation, of course, which doesn't lead to Inspector Raj, so-called Inspector Raj, and that we need to regulate quickly. Secondly, sometimes we saw during this crisis that the shortage of not only manufacturing side, for example, PPEs were not there, ventilators were not there, lots of things were not even being manufactured here, and we had to quickly ramp up production of these items. In terms of quality infrastructure also we were lacking. There was one lab for COVID testing, there was hardly any lab for N95 ventilator masks, so the infrastructure was not there, and we have quickly built into that. So, for example, medical devices when they are unregulated. So the biggest challenge today is if they are unregulated, how does one assure quality? What should one do? And what kind of certification one should get, because it's not regulated. So some quality assurance mechanism has to be there. So to me, the lesson of this COVID crisis should be in terms of the huge relevance of regulation when it comes to health and safety issues, the huge relevance of having a quality infrastructure in place for critical items, what is critical to the country, so that we don't struggle the way we have struggled. So I would think for me these two things, if they can be done properly. To give you a simple example, for example,
Please.
PPEs, we are saying go for BI certification. They are being told go for BI standards is a good strategy because medical devices rules say you should comply with BI standards. Go for BI certification. My concern is that 1 year later, when actually medical devices rules actually kick in, they do not require certification. And then the same industry will surrender the certification because certification has a cost. Over and above regulation, if you go for certification, certification has a cost. Every certification has a cost. So they will all surrender that certification and go back to the regulation which requires only an audit and not certification. So how does one, so to me, industry is being pushed from one solution to another in quick time of next 1.5 years, which will have cost implications, and it's not good for that industry. So there is this gap between what we are going to do in future and what is being done today.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. And if I may just pick the thread on the thought here, I think these are the times where we actually possibly, as you rightly said, have a fine balance between the enabling regulatory environment and something that actually people think it as a black box. I think that's very, very important that we actually build an enabling environment. And I think I have seen steps during these times where people have been able to reach out to the regulatory body directly, be it CDSCO, the equivalents of, Dr. Sumani, even to ICMR for diagnostic tests and so on. There was an approachable, opportunities and then discussion in terms of what we need to do. But as you rightly said, if there are gaping holes which are there, I think as a system we should address those so the next challenging times we don't really get stuck again. I think we should be proactively looking at that. I think these are important inputs and I think we should certainly look into that. With that thought, I think something that the regulatory environment, which actually possibly is one of the biggest mountain for anyone to climb, is the innovator or the company itself. And I think Jayant, who is a part of several such efforts, what do you think, apart from regulations, your view from the ground in such times and we're going forward, what do you think, Jayant, how things have changed in brief, possibly, and what do you think would be good for you as an inventor, as an innovator to have so that your effort gets best hand-holding, best nurturing environment, which you are entitled to. Over to you.
Yeah, I think this is the best time from the inventor's perspective, actually. If you see, the way I look at the overall problem is, of course, from the multiple perspectives. In terms of a disease state, if you look at it, we are seeing the transition from quite some years from malnutrition to infectious diseases to the non-communicable diseases, and this pandemic has really brought in focus towards the infectious diseases, and that's a great opportunity. And what it has really forced is basically change in terms of the delivery models, the way the care is being delivered. On the other axis, if you look at it in terms of technology developments as well as the adoption of technologies, I think the pace in which the technologies are being adopted is phenomenal, and that really necessitates the cross germination of the ideas, especially from the inventor's perspective, if you see, or the innovations perspective, if you see. I think working in the silos is a past thing. What needs to be done is basically cross germination of ideas. Having expertise only in one field is not really necessary. There has to be an overlap amongst the and it has to be a kind of a team efforts with a multidisciplinary approach. So that is something which is coming up. More importantly, if you see, I think as an innovator, what we constantly try to do is basically to look for the solutions which are more market appropriate. And what this pandemic has really highlighted is the requirement in terms of scalability of the products, scalability and deployability of the products, affordability of the products, and more importantly, basically uh, their applicability in the resource poor setting. So this is something which has been highlighted by this pandemic, and I think this is the kind of opportunities available to innovate are really great. The ecosystem is there, and there cannot be any better scenario than this for the innovators perspective to come up with the new ideas and implement them.
Thank you. On your words of, there cannot be a better opportunity where the world is looking for solutions for inventors to build those innovations and make them, serve the society around us. For sure. I just wanted to remind our participants that there is in the discussion side tab, if you were to wanted to put some questions, you can put, and we can, in last 5 minutes or so, we'll try to take those questions if there are any. Otherwise, we'll continue with the panel discussions. If you are seeking to have some questions, please put those under the question answer tab under discussion. Coming back, I think seeing that we have a few 11 minutes odd in the session, and we have covered significant ground to be in the panel already. From a perspectives that we wanted to build. I wanted to jump to a possible out of box thoughts, if there were any, from, let's say, if we were to look at innovation as a driver, as a engine for take India forward, what are the top two to do and top two do not do from each one of them? If we can have it, there would be a repetition because the first one will have the best chance, so I understand. But still, go ahead with your top two. That why do you think, what should we do as a nation? And I think this would be a good idea for a lot of participants to hear those thoughts. It could be a direction to a government, it could be a direction to a ecosystem, it could be a direction to an inventor or innovator, but please do share your thoughts. And I'll go with the same order for now and see if, Shonti, if you were to give your thoughts on that. If India looks at innovation and engine and want to, as one says, as Professor Mashilkar says, pole vault in the innovation index in few years down the line, what is 2 points to do and 2 points not to do?
I'm going to take that in the reverse order, Taslim, because I think it's really important to say what you're not going to do. You can't be everything to every man. However aspirational, and it was very, very inspirational for me this morning to hear about the lofty aspirations, almost stratospheric aspirations that people had. That's very good. But we've also got to keep, at the same time, our feet firmly on the ground. Otherwise, they will remain aspirations and dreams and not realities. So I always draw a wish list and a reality list. And we need to move things out of the wish list and the reality, and some will forever remain in the wish list.
Correct.
That is real life, and that is my life as a clinician. I may want to transplant a head, but I'm not going to be able to transplant a head today. So I'm not evading the question, but what I would rather say to and not to is, I think for me, the 3 A's that have led my life as a clinician, scientist, and clinician entrepreneur are these 3 A's. I come from Sri Lanka, which has gone through so many travails. 27 years of an ethnic conflict, the tsunami, the Easter bombings. And I was there through every one of them. And we have come out the other side. And I have been in the midst of them. I was 2 miles away from the Easter bombings on the day. We have to make things which are affordable, first day, accessible, second day, and appropriate. And every time you do something, ask yourself whether these 3 A's, and for me, at least 2 of those 3 have to be fulfilled. Otherwise, they remain aspirational, which is the fourth A. So I may not be giving you the two to do and two not to do, but what I'm saying is in anything you do, ask yourself this question: can you get those at least 2 out of the 3 A's? And people talk about, LMIC countries and developing countries. I work in one of the most challenging healthcare systems in the world, the National Health Service, where we never close our door. Yet, we are able to provide continuously despite any of the shortcomings. And that's because every day that we go, I like the theme of this meeting, resilience redefined. But there's also the reality of resilience, which is that when I go to work every day, it is resilience because you have to do something without so many things. But I think honesty about what we can achieve, we can have aspirations for the future, but we also have to achieve something now. So for India, it is about what is it, and I like what I heard this morning in the inauguration, which is farm to factory doesn't work. Farm to green revolution is what the minister spoke about. So a sort of a reality check of what we can achieve in the here and now, whilst also aspiring for the future. So I may have not given you the 2 plus 2, but I've given you 3 A's.
No, thank you, Sharni, for that. I think we'll pick 2 A's as the to-dos and a couple of A's not to do, including the aspiration side of it. So we'll pick it that way. But those are very insightful and something that would go a long way for many people, including innovators per se. Coming to Jitendra, if is there, what are your quick points, 2 points on the 2 things that you would suggest that as a nation we should look into? This is not to inventors again. I'm trying to take a step back. You have the ability to give the broader perspective as well that you think one should do as a nation, and 2 things that we should as a nation, either an ecosystem, an innovator, a funding agency, a regulatory agency, we should not do if we were to go to that place.
Yeah, I will stick to your do's and twos, not do's. I will tell you what can be done. No point in giving you what cannot be done. One, the entire innovation ecosystem works in the hope of a market. If you tell any innovator, go struggle your life, take awards, go on stage, have great Twitter recommendations, but you don't get any order, you won't find the innovator doing what they are doing, right? So for me, the 2 things that should be done is, one, public procurement of medical devices should only be on GEM, the government e-marketplace, which is operated by Ministry of Commerce, because it leads to transparent, ethical, and standardized procurement. And it has a new place for innovation. The second thing, which more from an industrial perspective is suggested, if you can close the mics, there is some echo, I'm sorry. Yeah. The second thing which is recommended more from an industrial perspective is, you see, we have these good startups, innovators. Taslim, you also know a lot of them. In the committees we see, we come across them. We take a decision of helping them through institutions or not helping them depending upon their idea. And then we have these big companies which run the show. There is a middle class in medtech. And this middle class in medtech needs somewhere around 1,000 crore fund so that they can leapfrog into production capacities. So on one side, in the to-do list, point number 1 takes care of their market and point 2 takes care of their production capacities. Now I'll come to 2 things in my humble opinion, personal opinion, which is not, can't say not to do, but there are certainly better ways of doing it. One, Indian medical devices sector is under the medical devices rules, as was explained by Mr. Johari. And globally, this is the only rule, and rule is part of a law, that exists without an act. Because the parent act of medical devices rules, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940, does not even have the word called medical devices. And therefore, we are actually trying to transplant the head, which is not possible. And we are superimposing that head into a 1940 act. And Niti Aayog today has a draft in working of a Medical Devices Act, which is contemporary and internationally harmonized. In the not to do list, I would suggest to migrate gradually in a phased manner from the current regulatory regime to an internationally harmonized regime. And the second not to do list is, I think there is a craze of awards for innovation, lot of certificates, lot of medals. And I think somewhere enterprises are getting confused of their end goal. Should they aim for an award, or should they aim for survival, or should they aim for a market? I think the innovation ecosystem have to be more outcome oriented and not output oriented. The number of people who retweet your innovation is important, but is not critical to the sustainability of your business as an innovator. Finally, that innovation business has to rest upon good quality standards, good production practices, and good market practices and market gateways. So I would suggest migrating from a very cosmetic, award-driven innovation ecosystem to an outcome, production capacity, market-driven ecosystem in innovation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. They're very insightful on the ground indications of what we could do, including a big boost for the manufacturing setup for medtech devices, and also a quick inputs to innovators to possibly look at the bottom line for them, which is very, very important for the longevity of the innovative company and so on. We have a couple of questions in the question and answer, so would love to go there. We have reached 55 minutes of this session, so we have 5 minutes. May I request Mr. Joris for his quick comments after Jayant's comment. So Mr. Jory, very quick comment so that we can reach to the questions as well. But I think you have already indicated a few.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I'm surprised that what I learned in my initial training in standardization is something that I keep repeating. So my first not to do thing would be, please, we were taught, please do not freeze design, please do not freeze manufacturing. Please focus on performance oriented standards. Our regulations need to do the same. That would foster innovation. So the desire to be, we in India have a great desire to become very prescriptive, write down everything on paper, because we don't want to give discretion, because we think discretion will be abused. So it's a vicious circle. It is abused sometimes, yes, but that should not be the reason for 5 people abusing discretion should not be reason for 100 people being put into trouble. So my first thing would be that. Second would be that quality needs to be built into, we were told that quality is built into design. So I can't see an innovator who would not look at what are the regulations, what are the standards the market accepts when he starts right in the beginning, and build that into his product right from the beginning, and not after having produced a prototype, now you're asking what kind of regulation I have to meet or what kind of certification I have to meet. Just after this program, I am going into another session with the startups, and I face this question. I have a prototype. Now what do I do? But oh God, you should have, before the prototype, you should have known what is expected if you are in medical device sector. What is the regulation expecting from you? So you have to meet that as a compulsory requirement. And what is the market expecting from you if there is anything over and above the regulation, any voluntary requirement. So I think I'll just stick to these two. A, that please don't freeze design, don't freeze manufacturing, allow for innovation. Don't be too prescriptive in your regulations. Let there be discretion. For 5 people who will abuse that discretion, don't deny another 100 people the ability to, innovate. And please, for the startups, please build quality or regulation right into the design itself, design of your product from day one. Please first find out, are you into a regulated sector? Medical devices is a regulated sector. If you are regulated, what are the product requirements? You have to meet them, build them into your design.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ajori. And I would say that the first one has a big picture perspective. I think it's a very, very important point. And I think those bold things calls are important for us to allow people to, innovate. Jayant, very quick points from you, if I may request, and then I would like to take 2 questions at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from innovators' perspective, outside in, basically going out and trying to understand the requirements and then appropriately translating them into the business model. I think that is very, very important, and that needs to be focused. And I think as Mr. Anil Johri has emphasized in terms of regulations, I think it has to be from the day one. One needs to understand the regulatory pathway clearly. More importantly, I think the clinical pathway also is equally important, and that needs to be understood. And I think to come to the Dr. Jitendra's point, I think the success of innovation finally is when it gets deployed in a large scale and when there is a profitable and sustainable organization. So building that business model is equally important.
Indeed. No, thank you so much, coming from inventor himself. And I'm sure it will be echoed across the inventor community. We have 2 questions, and I think...
if you allow me a couple, 1 minute.
Please, sorry, please go ahead.
Just to stress a point and give you actually real life story. So to stress that point.
Sure.
It's very important to look at this 9000 philosophy way back in 87. 9000 came out. Customer and regulatory requirements. And I'll give you an example, a very simple example of how we can be, wrong on customer requirements if we are not in touch with the actual customer. Around, I think about 10 years ago, I guess, I was helping a project on upgradation of public services. And one of them was post offices. So we said that there has to be a customer survey of what customer is expecting. So actually, in a Delhi post office, a survey was done. What would you think a post office customer would expect from a post office? Anybody would think, oh, faster delivery of letters or whatever, the postal services. You know what was the outcome of the survey? The outcome of the survey was that a majority of the people coming to the post office today are senior citizens, because there's no letters, no emailing has come, courier services have come, nobody is coming to the post office other than senior citizens. They come for their saving schemes, etc. So they said, we come here, we present our passbook, the clerk tells us, please come back after 3 hours. But we have time. We are not saying that you give us the passbook immediately. We have time. But we don't have time to go back home, come back again to collect the passbook. So we would like to sit here. So what we need is, please provide us some water, place to sit, and a fan on top. This was the finding of a post office. These 3
so
were the
Mr. Johri, I would like to just interject at this point. Exactly that. The 2 A's, the accessibility and appropriateness.
Yeah.
So 2 of your 3 A's.
What is the solution? What is the customer telling you? And actually, I saw post offices change in my own locality. The post office where people were standing in a window outside in the sun now has inside chairs, fan, and a glass of, some kind of arrangement for water.
So my closing thought is that, just please remember those 3 A's. It has served me well.
No, absolutely. I think very important. So I would just possibly go to one of the questions, just in the interest of time, but very well put, I think, Mr. Johri. One question is from Lakshya Sahani. And anyone could take it, but let's make it quick. What is your opinion on regulations of non-invasive brain stimulation technologies like TVCS? Apparently, there are no clear regulations about it in India. And I think Mr. Johri briefly mentioned about regulations, but anything that you want to quickly reply, Mr. Johri, on that, or anyone else?
To my understanding, we are in a transition phase. You know that earlier medical devices were being regulated by notifying each device this regime is changing. Now a definition of medical device has been notified on 11th of February. It's applicable from 1st of April 2020. So I guess everything gets covered. The definition is so pervasive that everything gets covered. In that case, we are now in transition of 18 months where it's only voluntary registration. And then from 1st of October 2021, Class A and B advices will be expected to comply with medical devices rules. So I guess for anybody who is in this space should look at medical devices rules. They prescribe compliance to BIS standards. Look at BIS standards. If they're not there, ask for them.
Indeed, indeed. No, thank you for that. Anyone else would like to add, or I can go to the next question very quickly. The second one is from Jayashri Rao. And the question is simple but important one. It says that many times it is difficult to interpret medical device rules for the first time into entrepreneurs. Which agency one should go to for right interpretation? There is nobody who can possibly decode the issues related to regulatory aspects of it in India.
I guess if you have to get clarity on medical devices rules, first place to go to is to the regulator, right to the regulator himself and get clarification. But we know that a whole lot of consultants are available in the market who can also interpret and clarify to you what needs to be done. And fortunately, over the last 2 years, I have been engaged with consultants who are a scattered lot usually. But I was able to nudge them into creating an association. So now there's a consultants association in Chennai and a WhatsApp group, etc. So there is a formal place to go to, and shortly an All India association will be available. They have already filed papers. So we can link them up to some of the consultants who are available in the market.
Thank you. That would hopefully help. Anyone would like to add to this two answers before we formally conclude? Any points from anyone?
But if clarification is required, please go to BIS, because it's BIS standards which are to be complied.
That's a good input again. Correct. If not, if I may possibly take this opportunity, I think it was we had 1 hour, and I think we have very well used 1 hour to discuss different aspects of innovation building and path forward for healthcare innovations. India is possibly going through an interesting churn where the capabilities are being built, the systems are being possibly coming together, including the government systems which are working in different aspects of it, and the connectivity, which I didn't bring up today, between academia, industry and startup is also possibly getting closer, which requires a little bit more on that. So there are significant optimistic aspects, but much to be done. These are baby steps according to me, and I hope the panelists will agree. There's much to be done, and I think with the involvement of everyone, we'll be able to get there. With these thoughts, I would like to end this particular panel discussion. It has been fantastic to have everyone, Professor Shravanti, Dr. Jitendra Sharma, Mr. Anil Johri, Dr. Jayant Karve. Thank you so much for your time. And I think hopefully this panel discussion was insightful for our participants as well. Before I end, I would like to thank organizers, of course, BIRAC, as well as IIT Kanpur's incubation cell, and everyone involved in that team to allow us the opportunity to share our thoughts, and best of the wishes for the rest of the discussions. Thank you all.
Thank you.